Today we're diving into an idea in education that sounds, well, kind of crazy. It's called the silent way, and it's a method for learning a language where the teacher's main job is to say almost nothing at all.
So let me just ask you this. Imagine you walk into your very first language class. You're ready to learn, but the teacher just stands there in silence. Do you think you could actually learn anything? It sounds pretty impossible, right?
Well, this is what that classroom actually looks like. It's different. There are no lectures, no one at the front of the room shouting out words to repeat. Instead, you've got a teacher who's just pointing, using gestures, and students who are talking to each other, working with these colorful charts and rods. The room's not silent, but the one person you expect to hear from is. So what in the world is going on?
Okay, so this method is called the silent way, created by an educator named Caleb Gottagoodnow. The whole idea is right in the name. The teacher stays quiet on purpose to pretty much force the student to be the star of the show. You're no longer a passive listener. You have to become an active problem solver.
But if the teacher isn't using their voice, what are they using? Well, the silent way depends on some very specific hands-on tools. There are two main props. Over on the left, you've got these little colored wooden blocks called Cuisenaire rods. Each color and length can stand for anything: a noun, a verb, even abstract ideas like verb tense. Then on the right, you see these sound color charts, which are called fiddles. Each colored block represents one and only one sound in the language. So the teacher can just point at the chart to show you how to pronounce a word without ever saying it themselves.
I know what you might be thinking. This all seems way too complicated. Why not just tell the students the right answer? Well, that question gets right to the very heart of the philosophy behind all this quiet.
And this quote from Gottagoodnow just nails it. The teacher's job isn't to be a fountain of knowledge, just pouring information into a student's head. Nope. Their job is to create a puzzle, a situation that makes the student grapple with the language directly and figure it out on their own.
Gottagnow's whole theory rests on a few core beliefs. He said that real learning isn't about memorizing stuff. It's a creative act of discovery. He pictured the learner as a kind of scientist or an explorer. You use these physical objects, the rods, to create and test your own theories about how the language works. It's all about making you use your most powerful tool, your own awareness. So, what this all boils down to is a massive shift in how we think about the classroom. In a typical class, the expository mode, the teacher has the knowledge and the student listens and memorizes. But in the silent way, or the hypothetical mode, the teacher is more of a guide. The student is the one who discovers the knowledge. They're an active participant, not a passive bucket. And in a system like this, what happens when you get something wrong? Which, let's be honest, you will. Well, errors are actually a good thing. They're not seen as failures. An error is just a clue. It's data that tells you, okay, that idea was wrong, let's try another one. The teacher won't tell you no, they'll just make a small gesture or point to a rod to nudge you toward correcting it yourself. All right, so that's all the theory, but what does this actually look like in a real, live lesson? Let's walk through how you'd build a language from absolute zero.
So a lesson starts with the absolute basics. A teacher might just point to a color on the sound chart, and the students have to experiment until they make the right sound. Then the teacher might tap a rod and say the word rod. That's one of the very few times they'll speak. After that, it's all gestures, guiding a student to figure out, take a red rod. Little by little, it gets more complex. Take a long green rod. And then, the magic moment. The teacher steps back completely, and the students start making up their own sentences.
And this is exactly what that guidance looks like. See, the teacher isn't saying, no, that's the wrong vowel. They're just pointing to the right color on the chart. Maybe they'll gesture toward their own mouth to get the student to think about the shape they need to make. The whole point is to help them feel the difference and find the right sound themselves. It's all about building that inner sense of what's right.
So, if this method is so interesting, why isn't every language class on Earth taught this way? Well, let's take a look at its real legacy.
The silent way has always been a bit of a fringe method. Let's be real. It takes an incredibly skilled teacher to pull it off, and it can feel strange and maybe even a little slow for students who are used to normal classes. But its influence is huge. It was a really important part of this big shift in teaching, moving away from just mind-numbing repetition and towards a more creative, problem-solving approach led by the student.
So, what's the bottom line here? First, a teacher's silence isn't an absence of teaching. It's a tool that can actually empower the learner. Second, true learning is about discovery, not just memorizing facts. Third, sometimes having a physical object in your hand can make a really abstract idea suddenly make sense. But maybe the most important takeaway of all is that the greatest resource in any classroom isn't the teacher's knowledge, it's the student's own awareness.
And that leaves us with one final big thought. We've seen how this works for learning a language, sure, but what about other things? Think about learning math, or coding, or how to play an instrument. Where else might a little less talking from the teacher and a little more silent discovery from the learner completely change the game?